Добрий день, шановні колеги. Добрий день, шановні колеги. Ми продовжуємо наш робочий день і зараз будемо говорити про оприлюднення рейтингу парламентських комітетів.
I would like to invite Olexandr Bratushchak, the coordinator of monitoring Vidkryto, Yulia Korzenyuk, coordinator observers monitoring Vidkryto, coordinator, and Ganna Rozhkova, coordinator of Access to Information Department. You're welcome. Good afternoon. I am Olexandr Bratushchak. I will start our presentation. I want to mention that this is not the first rating which we have prepared. The first one was in the end of February, in the result of the first month of our activities. Then we were defining the best and the worst committees in the Verkhovna Rada according to two criteria: accessibility and openness. Now our rating is based on the basis of 5 criteria: openness, accessibility, which we used the first time, and we added such things as transparency, activity, and problematic. Talking about openness, we were looking at what is the attitude of each one of the committee to norms of legislation. The meetings of the committees are open, everyone can attend them, but our committees are in buildings, and to get into the building you need to have a pass. And every committee decides who to issue the pass, who not to issue the pass, and this way they create artificial obstacles for the public to get to the sittings of the committee. Second criteria, transparency. We were looking at how the committees make their documents public on official websites. We were looking, we looked at 5 documents which were to be made public: the agenda, the minutes of the sitting, the audio recording of the sitting, and video recording of the sitting. The next criteria is accessibility.
Accessibility, and we were looking at how the committees answer our requests to access public information. And according to this criterion, every committee got their own mark. Next criteria is the level of activity. We saw how often they hold their sittings, how MPs attend the sittings, and we were also looking at the 5th criterion, which is problematics. And according to other 4 criteria, you cannot calculate the examples when the head of the committee, for instance, like with the economy committee, the head of the did not want to gather the sitting, and the reason was that as a result of considering this draft law, the business partner of the head of the committee was risked to lose some millions of dollars. So we will tell about every criterion, what the committee has got and why. And now I suggest that we look who are leaders and outsiders. According to every criterion, the committee could get one of the 3 colors: green, yellow, or red. If, for instance, there were constant problems or significant problems, they got red. So the aggregated mark was could be from 1 to 25. The Committee for the Freedom of Speech got 21.7. The Committee for Family, Youth and Sports, then Foreign Affairs Committee, and fifth, the Committee for Science and Education. And the last slots, the lowest slots, were occupied by the committees where you can find a lot of money. And they were marked very low. They were openness and transparency is concerned, and the committee headed by Mr. Poshinsky, the Committee on National Security and Defense, got the lowest mark. We will later publish this on our site, and every committee does get a conditional diploma from us, which shows the slot that they occupied and the mark that they got. We also will add description to every diploma, why this color for every. This is a diploma for the first place, and this is for the 27th place. So you see that most of the colors in the first place are green. And now about criteria. I analyzed 2 criteria, and first I'll tell you about transparency. Within the framework of this criterion, I saw how the committees are publishing on their sites the 5 documents that I mentioned, and the general picture is not very pleasant. If, for instance, we saw that more than 90% of the protocols of the minutes of the procedure are being published, then the transcription of the rate of transcriptions is much lower. Less than a quarter of sittings can be heard in audio, and only 2 committees from only 2 sittings of all the committees out of more than 300 are there on the net in YouTube. Why it is important that the sites of the committees have transcriptions and audio and video recordings. Let's take one of the scandalous draft laws that they voted for recently, and then they told us that they didn't understand. It was first considered at the committee, and you can find the audio recordings and listen how they discussed this, how the head of the committee reacted to some positions of stakeholders, and how the MPs later voted. And if any citizen wants to get to know what has happened in the committee, if they have all the documents on the site, they can get to know. But if there are no documents, then they still can't know. What we noticed is that during this session, there is a committee on tax policy, and it has changed its chairperson during the session. It used to be Mr. Nasirov, now it's Ms. Yuzhanina, but nothing has changed as far as transparency of this committee is concerned. They don't have a single protocol or a single transcription or a single audio recording on their site, and they've got 0 where transparency is concerned. The Committee for Human Rights is the best in this category, then the Committee on Construction, then State Construction, and then Legal Policy. And the next criterion is the level of activity. we were looking at the number of the sittings of the committee and how the MPs attended the sittings. Why didn't we have this criterion when we started the work? We couldn't even imagine that MPs can play truant where the sittings are concerned. But then we saw the problem that very often the committees do not get a quorum. For instance, representatives of public organizations or government come who are interested in discussing the draft law, but the MPs cannot get more than half of their membership, so they come and wait, and then they go away without anything, any work. Out of these two indicators, we made an integral indicator that was calculated as a general mark, so the procedural committee was the best. We can explain this, that while the committee was regarding the removal of deputies' immunity from Mr. Kluyev, they get it several times. The worst in this case was the Human Rights Committee, and the last but one, the Veterans Committee. Analyzing the activity of MPs, we saw that during April and May, compared to February and March, the committees have gathered 18% less, and the number of truants increased by 50%. Those who haven't come a single time to committee sittings, we now have 27 such MPs, while we had only 18 in February and March. So this is about two criteria. And my colleagues will tell you about the other criteria.
Good afternoon, I'm Korzenyuk Yulia. During the work of our monitoring, I was working with a group of observers. These are people, thanks to who we received information about the sittings of the committee. And the criteria I will be talking about is the criteria of openness. We were analyzing how our observers were able to get to the sittings. They were trying to get passes, but there were problems with that. There's not a single system of getting passes. Very often we have to send the request to email and receive the pass. But there were secretaries who mentioned, please fax this to us or send us a letter by regular mail, which today, in the 21st century, is just absurd. But we managed to work on the committees to allow our observers to attend. 15 committees are open, 3 are closed, and 7 committees which we managed to get in every other time. The committees which are open: construction, budget, European integration, foreign affairs, culture and spirituality, science and education, public health, fuel and energy, human rights, freedom of speech, youth and sport, social policy, veterans, transport is closed, and financial policy is open. Talking about the committees where we could not get in is environmental policy committee. Those who were saying send us the letter by regular mail, and the Committee on National Security and Defense. It's the lowest in our rating. Our observers were mostly faced with the problems like not knowing who's responsible for issuing passes. In some committees, These were the heads of secretariat, and some committees, these were people who were responsible for the system of passing to their committee, but these people are not very often accessible to such NGOs as ours, and we had to call 3-4 phone numbers. It takes half a day, because I believe this is no secret that very often you cannot reach our state bodies. And this way we were trying to get to the sitting. So our main conclusions are we need to create the single system of passes for committees, and we'll continue to work on that in the future. I'm Rozhkova Ganna. I will be telling you about access to public information. You can see the difference between our activities, because these were our first replies in February, and we saw that just half or less answered our requests. Some did not answer, and some were committees which wrote something. They did not give exact information. They refused to provide public information. And then my task was not just to do monitoring to show whether the committees work or not. I needed to show to committees how they should work, to explain that in our legislation we have the presumption of open information. Then I did several things. And in the result of that, only one committee did not give us information, and that is the Committee on Industrial Policy and Entrepreneurship. They never replied to our information request, but I did not send to them any explanations, and we just submitted the case to the court. The next criteria, next thing I did, I went to the Secretariat of the Ombudsman, because they are responsible for access to public information. And the situation was, on the 20th of March, the Secretariat of the Ombudsman received our complaint. That was registered, and on the 26th of May, they started the case. They filed the case. It took 75 days for them to just start the case. Then on the 8th of June, they requested me the information, but in general it took me 87 days since the time I sent the request to the Ombudsman till I received information. I can say that the legislation is well worded, and the Ombudsman should be working on issues of access to information, but the apparatus of the Ombudsman is overburdened, and that is why the efficiency is quite doubtful. And they started on the 26th the case, and on the 20th they received my complaint. I also addressed the Committee on Industrial Policy, because they were violating legislation. On the 1st of September, I submitted the case to the court. Then they said that the parties will not be invited to the sittings of the court. Till today they did not inform me about the results, and they did not inform me that the case is closed. Probably it's still being considered. That is the information I wanted to share with you.
Вітаю. Нейтер Роман, координатор моніторингу «Відкрито».
Coordinator of monitoring Vidkryto. I will tell you about the problems that we have in the work of the committees and the Verkhovna Rada. one of the mechanisms of pressing the authorities is public actions. During the monitoring Vidkryto, several actions were organized. The first was about committees. During the first month of activities, we received enough information in order to understand how committees are working and how we will organize our work in the future, whether they give passes to the sittings, whether they organize whether they have their sittings open or closed, do they reply to the requests for information, how many sittings they had. And we defined the best and the worst committees. We had the rating, and you've heard about that. The best committees received from us a symbolic gift, a bottle opener, and the worst committees received from us the cans. Not everyone wanted to take can, and the security requested us to leave the Verkhovna Rada, and then we send these cans in parcels. The second was called was about the Committee on Economic Policy failed to get together 4 times. According to their regulations, this is enough grounds for dismissing the head of the committee. This section was divided into several stages. First, the flash mob and social networks, information support, and the meeting near the building of the approval council. The result of that is that the committee got together. The sitting was not announced. It could have been recognized as not as the one that did not happen, but they got together, they considered the issues they had to consider, and they sent the draft law to the session hall. Ivanchuk wrote a request about resignation, but the Verkhovna Rada did not accept it. The committee did not allow our observer to their sitting, which was open, when they were considering the issue of dismissing Ivanchuk. Third action is the MPs who are missing the sittings. During this period of time, we were looking at how they attend the sittings. And so we sent the request about how often the MPs attend the sittings of the committee. In the result, we identified 11 people who during the second session, not a single time were present at the sittings of the committee. Now, when we received answers, some answers were sent to us after the term that was stated by the law. We can say that numbers of these MPs, it was not 11 but 18. The action itself was divided into several stages. The beginning of the action was the meeting near the building of the council. The second was disseminating materials like that. And that is to MPs, so that every MP knows who are the colleagues who do not execute their duties. Besides that, the MPs who have never attended the sitting of the committee, we would send them the special invitation letters. Those MPs who did not receive this invitation from us, we sent them with the assistance of mass media, of the Post. Then we organized a briefing in the Verkhovna Rada, and we collected the signatures of MPs under the request to Groisman to publish after each sitting of the committee the list of MPs who were not there. In the result, we have the situation when MPs after they received personal invitation, attended the sittings of the committee. The example of that is MP Bonder. Next day he attended the sitting of the Regulations Committee, and he was applauded by his colleagues MPs. His work during this sitting was very fruitful. Several people apologized, several said that they were deceived and so on, but most of the problems were mentioned. The low attendance, the problem with admitting the observers, and voting without quorum. This could be, well, also the sitting very often was not announced, but they would have it. What could be the solutions? Publishing the name of the one who's missing the sittings. Also, we would know who attends the meetings, who doesn't, and the second, we would know which meetings were held, sittings were held, which were not held, and we could compare that with the list of the sittings announced by the committee. Second is introducing the mechanism and to control, so that every sitting which was taking place without announcement is not void. When there's no quorum, they can listen to everyone and leave. If there's no quorum, they have no right to vote. But they still have voting even if there's no quorum. Such sittings will be controlling and will be providing information about that to the public. And the introducing of a new system of passes. Now this new system, we want to introduce this system to get access to buildings of the committees. And we will resolve that by legislative initiative. The MPs, if the sitting of the committee is open, then every citizen can be present at this sitting. Thank you, colleagues. No more questions, so I would like to thank you for your work. And our working day is over. Thank you.